You think you can hide from me? Nah, I will burn down every building in this city until I find you. She heard his voice through the phone, and her hand stopped shaking, not because she was calm, because something inside her finally broke clean through fear into something colder. She was already running, barefoot, hotel uniform soaked through. And when her hand hit the handle of a black Mercedes she'd never seen before, and it opened, she threw herself in and pulled the door shut and pressed both hands over her mouth so he wouldn't hear her breathing. She had no idea whose car this was. She was about to find out. If that first line just stopped your heart, you're exactly where this story needs you. Hit subscribe. Drop a comment right now. What city are you watching from? I want to see how far Na's story travels. Now stay with me, because it gets so much deeper. The phone call had started 40 seconds before she ran. She'd been standing in the service corridor of the Aldridge Hotel, coat half-on, badge still clipped to her chest when it buzzed. Unknown number. But she knew. She always knew when it was him, the way animals know weather before it arrives. She answered because not answering was worse. Not answering meant he showed up. Where are you? Not a question. Never a question with Marcus. Statements dressed up as questions, demands wearing the costume of conversation. I'm at work, she said. Steady. She'd learned steady. You clocked out 7 minutes ago. The system shows it. A pause. The particular silence Marcus used when he wanted her to understand that he was everywhere, that there was no corner of her life he hadn't already mapped. So I'll ask you again, baby. Where are you? Her throat closed. She looked down the corridor service exit to the left lobby to the right. She did the math in 3 seconds. I'm leaving now, she said. I'll call you when I'm outside. The line went dead. She stood there for exactly 1 breath. Then she shoved through the service exit and ran. The rain hit her like the wall. Cold hard, the kind of Chicago rain that doesn't apologize. She came out on the south side of the building and turned north on Wabash, moving fast, not looking back. Because looking back was how you tripped, and looking back was how you lost the half second that sometimes meant everything. She heard him before she saw him. Nah. His voice came from behind her and to the left, which meant he'd anticipated the service exit, which meant he'd been watching the building long enough to know which door she'd use. That understanding hit her in the stomach like something physical. He planned this. She cut right between 2 parked cars. The valet lot for the hotel's private entrance, a row of black sedans and town cars, sitting dark and rain-slicked in the shadow of the building. She moved down the row, one hand dragging across door handles. Testing. Desperate. Not thinking anymore, just moving. Locked. 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 You're embarrassing yourself. Marcus closer now. That particular tone he used, the quiet one, the reasonable one, the one that sounded like concern and felt like a hand around your throat. Come out. We'll talk. That's all I want. That's all I want. She'd believed that once. She had the scar on her left forearm that marked the last time she'd believed it. The 4th car. Black Mercedes. Long, dark, rain-sheened. She grabbed the handle. It opened. She didn't think. She dropped in, pulled the door shut, pressed herself flat against the floor behind the front seats, and clamped both hands over her mouth. Footsteps outside. Slow. Searching. I see your footprints in the rain, baby. His voice was right there, maybe 8 feet away, maybe less. She could hear the wet sound of his shoes on asphalt. You ran this direction. I know you're close. She didn't breathe. I'm not angry, he said, and the horror of it was that he sounded like he meant it. I'm worried about you. You're not thinking straight. You haven't been thinking straight for months, and I've been so patient. Nah. But you keep doing this, and I need you to understand. His voice moved. Past the car, continued north. She stayed down. She counted to 30, then 30 more. Then the car started moving. The sound that came out of her throat was not a word. It was barely a sound. She pressed her face into the back of the passenger seat and felt the car pull smoothly, calmly out of the lot, and understood with complete and terrible clarity that she had solved one problem by landing inside a much bigger unknown. She stayed still. She thought red light. 3 blocks. I slip out at the first red light and I run. "You can sit up," said a voice from the front. She stopped breathing again. "I know you're there," the voice said. "I knew before I started the engine." A pause, brief and unhurried. "Sit up, please. Please." Such a strange word to hear. Such a civilized word in the middle of all this. Slowly she pushed herself up, sat on the edge of the back seat, back rigid hands, flat on her knees, ready to move. She raised her eyes to the rearview mirror and found a man already looking back at her, 40 maybe. Dark eyes that held no surprise, which was somehow the most alarming thing about him. A face that had seen things and absorbed them without flinching. He wore charcoal gray, and he drove with one hand on the wheel, completely relaxed, as if finding a terrified woman on his car floor was a routine inconvenience he'd already categorized and moved past. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice came out cleaner than she expected. "I needed to... There was someone..." "The man in the lot." "Yes." "He's been following you." "Yes." "Then, how did you know he was following me and not just standing there?" "Because men who are just standing somewhere don't move the way he moved," said Victor. "He was tracking. There's a difference." His eyes returned to the road. "Is he dangerous?" She almost said no by reflex, the old reflex, the one trained by years of minimizing, of making it smaller so other people wouldn't have to deal with it. "Oh, it's fine. It's not that bad. He just gets intense sometimes." She swallowed that reflex whole. "Yes," she said. "He thinks I belong to him." Victor said nothing for a moment. Then, "Your name." "Nah." "Victor." He said it without offering his hand, without turning around. Just placed it in the air between them like a fact. "Where do you need to go, nah?" And there it was. The question that had no good answer. She looked out the rain-blurred window at the lights of Michigan Avenue streaming past and thought about every place she could name: her apartment, which Marcus had a key to; Dana's place, which Marcus had shown up at twice; the shelter on Diversey, which had a 2-week wait list. She thought about $340 in her account and a phone that Marcus could track if he still had access to her carrier, which she'd never actually been able to confirm he didn't. "I don't have anywhere," she said. The words tasted like gravel. Victor's eyes moved to the mirror, held hers for exactly 2 seconds. "Then I'll take you somewhere safe for tonight." She went rigid. "I don't know you." "No." "That's not reassuring." "I know." He didn't try to make it reassuring. He just said, "I'll take you somewhere with a lock on the inside. Staff who won't ask questions. I'll leave you there and you won't see me again until morning unless you choose to." A pause. "Or I can stop at the next light and you can get out." She looked out the window. They were moving north. The rain was heavier now. Somewhere behind them, Marcus was still in that lot. Or he'd already moved to her apartment. Or he was calling the friends he called when he needed information, and he always had friends like that, people whose names she never learned, people who materialized out of nowhere to tell him things. "Don't stop," she said. Back. 11 minutes. She counted every one. He didn't talk, and she didn't force it, and the music that came back on low strings, classical, the kind of thing that belonged in old European movies, somehow made the silence bearable. She studied him the way she'd learned to study men she didn't trust, peripherally gathering information without appearing to gather it. He drove without checking his phone, without fidgeting, without any of the small performative behaviors people use to signal that they're being good, that they're safe, that you should relax. He simply drove, which was somehow more calming than any of those performances would have been. "Can I ask you something?" she said around the 7th minute. "Yes." "Why didn't you stop the car the second you felt me get in, or call someone, or—" "Because you weren't a threat," he said, "and whatever you were running from clearly was." He glanced briefly in the mirror. "You pressed yourself into the floor. If you were afraid of me, you'd have bolted the moment the engine started. You stayed down, which told me the thing behind you was worse than the unknown in front of you." She stared at the back of his head. "You read all of that in what, 30 seconds? 20, he said. And there was nothing boastful in it, just accurate. That's either impressive or terrifying." "Often the same thing," he said. She didn't have an answer for that. She filed it away instead. King. The building was on the near north side. Not loud about its own quality. No gold fixtures, no oversized lobby art. Just the kind of restrained, intentional elegance that announced money without needing to say it. The security guard in the lobby nodded at Victor, with the particular nod of someone who knew better than to ask questions, and his eyes passed over Na exactly once and then moved away, which she understood was not indifference, but instruction. "She's with him. Leave it." The suite was on the 14th floor. Sparse, clean, cedar and cool air, and a window full of wet city light. Victor stood in the doorway and did not come in. "Food in the kitchen," he said. "Lock works from the inside. No one enters without your permission. That's not a courtesy, it's a rule." He met her eyes. "You're safe here tonight." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. She needed to ask it. She needed to hear whatever he said. He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that meant he was deciding how much truth to hand over. "I have a sister," he said finally. "A long time ago, someone should have helped her. No one did." He said it with no performance, no softness, just the clean, flat delivery of a fact he'd long since stopped being emotional about, which somehow made it the most emotional thing he could have said. "Sleep nah." He pulled the door closed. No lock clicked from the outside. She stood in the middle of that room, and she listened to his footsteps recede down the hall, and then she walked to the door and stood in front of it, and pressed one hand flat against the wood, and thought about a man who had left a door entirely in her control. Then she latched it herself, turned the deadbolt, felt the solid click of it, and went to the kitchen and ate everything in the refrigerator standing up because she was too hungry and too tired and too wrung out to sit down like a person who had leisure. And when the food was gone, she sat on the edge of the bed in her damp uniform, and she let the shaking come, all of it. The whole delayed avalanche of terror she'd been holding back since the moment she'd heard his voice on the phone. She let it move through her. She didn't fight it. And when it passed, she lay down on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling and did what she always did when she was alone, and finally still. She thought about how she'd gotten here, and whether here was better, and whether she would know the difference between safe and trapped quickly enough to matter. At 2:47 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hallway. She was up and at the door in under 3 seconds, ear pressed to the wood, both hands ready. The footsteps paused outside her door. Her jaw tightened. Then they continued on. Past. Gone. She stood there for a full minute, then went back to bed. She didn't sleep for another hour. When she finally did, it was the deep, crashed-out sleep of a body that had simply run out of adrenaline to run on, and for 6 hours, no dreams came, no footsteps, no voice saying, "I know you're close, baby." Just dark, and quiet, and the sound of rain. 3 knocks. Measured. A pause. She came awake with her heart already moving and her feet already on the floor. "Who is it?" "Victor." She unlatched the door. He stood in the hallway in dark trousers and a black shirt, 2 cups of coffee completely unhurried. He extended one toward her. She took it without thinking. "Your ex went to the Aldridge this morning," he said. 6 a.m., spoke to the night manager. Asked about your schedule, your route home, whether you had emergency contacts on file. She felt the floor tilt slightly. "How do you know that?" Victor looked at her, said nothing, and in that silence she felt the full shape of who she was dealing with shift like a picture whose proportions you suddenly understand are completely different from what you assumed. She looked down at the coffee in her hand, then back up at him. "He got information?" she asked. "The night manager knows better than to give it." A pause. "He doesn't know who your night manager answers to." She stared at him. My night manager answers to you. The Aldridge is one of 14 properties I have interests in, said Victor. His tone was factual, not proud. I've known Gerald, your night manager, for 11 years. He called me at 6:15. The picture shifted again, further. Who are you? She said. Not with fear, with the focused, clear-eyed need to understand. Someone who has resources, he said, and who has this morning chosen to direct some of them toward your situation. Why? He held her gaze. Because you made a decision last night. You got in a car you didn't know. You stayed when you could have run. You trusted something you had no evidence to trust. He tilted his head slightly. That's either the bravest thing or the most desperate thing I've seen in a while. Probably both. She wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. You still haven't answered why you care. No, he agreed. I haven't. He leaned against the doorframe. Tell me about him, Marcus. Why? Because knowing the shape of a threat is how you outlast it. He's not your threat to outlast. You're in my building, said Victor, which makes it adjacent to mine. He waited. You don't have to, but it might help. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to the window, coffee in both hands, and she talked. She told him about Marcus the way you tell someone about a wound that's been there so long. You've almost stopped registering the pain, flatly from the beginning, without the softening language she used to use when she was still trying to protect his image. How he'd been attentive at first, devoted she used to call it, before she understood that devotion and obsession wear the same face until one of them locks the door. How the tracking started as romance, then concern, then just fact. How he seemed to know where she was before she arrived anywhere. How his friends materialized from nowhere, people she'd never met, who knew things about her days they shouldn't have known. How leaving the first time had led to him showing up at her job. The second time at her mother's house. The third time, the last time she'd tried to leave before last night, he'd sat in his car outside her apartment for 9 hours, and she'd watched him from the window and understood completely and finally that this was not a man who would let her go, because she asked. He has people, she said. Everywhere. I stopped trusting anyone who knew us both because I never knew which one of them was reporting back to him. Victor had listened without interruption. Without the expressions people usually made, the winces, the sympathetic sounds, the anxious adjustments. He simply listened with a stillness that felt somehow like the most respectful response she'd ever gotten. Smart, he said. Lonely, she countered. Smart and lonely, he said, which is better than trusting the wrong person. She turned from the window, looked at him directly. Are you the wrong person? He held her gaze for a long, unhurried moment. I don't know yet, he said. That's an honest answer. She almost laughed. It startled her, the almost laugh, the fact that something in her could still access that. Most people would say no, of course not. Most people would be performing, said Victor. I'm telling you what's true. I don't know yet if I'm someone you should trust. What I know is what I've shown you so far. He straightened from the doorframe. The door was unlocked. The food was there. No one came in. A pause. That's the only evidence I have to offer. She looked down at the coffee, then back up. What happens now? She asked. That depends entirely on what you decide. And if I decide to stay, then we figure out Marcus, he said. Calm, absolute, as if figuring out Marcus was the same category of problem as rerouting a supply chain or restructuring a contract. You say that like it's simple. It's not simple, he said, but it's solvable. Most things are with the right resources and the right information. His eyes held hers. You've been solving this alone for 3 years. You don't have to solve it alone anymore. He paused. If you don't want to. The offer sat between them, clean, unadorned. Nah thought about 3 years of solving it alone. 3 years of looking over her shoulder and changing routes, and losing jobs and losing friends, and losing gradually the version of herself who'd existed before Marcus had decided she belonged to him. She thought about $340 in her account, and a city that suddenly felt like it had eyes in every corner. Then she thought about last night. The unlocked door. The food. Because I have a sister. I'll stay, she said. Something in Victor's face settled, barely visible but there. Like a calculation that had returned a result he'd considered possible, but not certain. Good, he said. He nodded once, turned to go. Victor. He stopped. Thank you, she said. Not for... She paused, searching for the right shape of it. Not for saving me. I'm not sure I want to be saved. She met his eyes. But thank you for giving me somewhere to stand while I figure out how to save myself. He looked at her for a moment. That, he said quietly, is exactly the right distinction. And he walked back down the hall. Na stood in the doorway and watched him go, and when he turned the corner and disappeared, she looked down at the coffee in her hands, still the right temperature impossibly, and she thought about what she'd just said. I don't want to be saved. I want to save myself. It was the first time in 3 years she'd said something that sounded like herself. She went inside, closed the door, turned the lock, her hand, her choice, her lock. Outside the window, Chicago went on being Chicago gray and vast and indifferent rain, still moving across the glass in thin, crooked lines. And 14 floors below in a coffee shop on Halsted, a man sat with his second cup of coffee and his phone in front of him, and the beginning of a smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. His contact had come through. The photo was grainy, taken through rain, but the building was clear enough. North Side. The address narrowed it. 3 blocks of options. Marcus set his cup down very carefully, the way he did everything carefully, patiently, with the absolute and unquestioned confidence of a man who had never once in his life accepted the word no as permanent. He typed a reply to his contact. Good work. I need the guest list for any events at that building this week. Then he leaned back, looked out at the rain. 2 days, he said to himself very quietly. Maybe 3. She always came back. One way or another, she always came back. He finished his coffee and started to plan. She spent the first hour of that morning doing something she hadn't done in years. She made a list. Not on paper, she didn't have paper. In her head, the way she used to organize herself before Marcus had made her feel like organization was pointless, like planning was futile, like the future was a room he controlled the key to. She sat cross-legged on the bed with the empty coffee cup in front of her, and she made a list of every concrete fact she knew about her situation. Fact: Marcus knew she worked at the Aldridge. Past tense now. That door was closed. Fact: Marcus had a contact in the valet lot, someone who'd taken a photo of the building. Victor had said the photo existed without explaining how he knew, which meant Victor had a contact watching Marcus's contact, which meant there were layers here she couldn't yet see the bottom of. Fact: she had $340 and no job and no plan beyond today. Fact: she was in a building owned by a man who had described himself as someone who managed interests and who somehow had 11 years of history with her night manager and knew about a photo taken in the rain before sunrise. She sat with those facts for a while. Let them be what they were. Then she took a shower because thinking clearly required being clean, and someone had left folded clothes outside the bathroom door. Dark jeans, a gray sweater, socks still in packaging in approximately her size. She stood in the doorway looking at them for a long moment. Then she picked them up and put them on, and didn't let herself feel complicated about it, because complicated feelings were a luxury, and she was running low on those. When she came out, there was a knock at the suite door. Not Victor's knock. 3 measured beats. This was 4 uneven. She stopped. Who is it? My name is Dara. A woman's voice. Brisk, professional. Mr. Renner asked me to come up. Renner. Victor's last name then. She filed it away. Why? He said you might need a phone. Na crossed to the door and opened it, keeping her body in the gap. The woman on the other side was maybe 50, with a face that had been through things and come out organized on the other side. Short natural hair, dark blazer, a slim phone in one hand, and an expression that communicated extreme competence and zero personal investment in Na's feelings about any of this. She extended the phone. Prepaid. Clean number. Mr. Renner said you'd understand what that means. Na took it. Tell him I said thank you. He also said to tell you breakfast is available on 12 if you want it, or I can bring something up. Dara's eyes moved over her with professional assessment. He said you should eat. He said a lot of things. He usually does. Not unkind, just accurate. 12 or here. Na thought about staying in this room versus moving through a building she didn't know yet. And then she thought about the list she'd made and the fact that information was the only currency she had, and that information lived in movement. 12, she said. The 12th floor had a small dining room that looked like it belonged to someone who understood that good meals didn't require spectacle. 4 tables. One other person eating alone by the window who glanced at Na and returned to his phone with the incuriosity of someone trained not to notice things. She sat at the table farthest from him facing the door, and a woman brought coffee and eggs and toast without asking, and Na ate with focus and efficiency and kept her eyes moving. She was halfway through the eggs when Victor came in. He didn't look like he'd slept, or rather, he looked like sleep was something he did efficiently without drama, and had already completed before she'd opened her eyes. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat without asking which should have annoyed her and didn't. Eat, he said, nodding at her plate. I am eating. Good. He poured himself coffee. How are you feeling? Like someone who slept 6 hours after running for her life. She pointed her fork at him. How did you know my size? Dara is very good at her job. That doesn't answer the question. You left a coat in the car last night, he said. She used the dimensions. Na blinked. She had left a coat. She'd completely forgotten. The coat Marcus had given her actually 2 winters ago, when he was still in the phase where gifts meant love and not leverage. She'd left it without thinking, and for a second she felt something irrational and sudden good. Let it stay gone. There's something I need to tell you, Victor said. He set his cup down. About Marcus. The fork stopped. My contact who monitors the photo situation last night after the image was sent there were 3 additional communications from the same number. I had them traced. He paused. Marcus has someone inside the Aldridge staff. Not Gerald. Someone lower. Housekeeping, we think, based on the timing of when information's been passed. The air in the room changed. Na set her fork down carefully. Someone I worked with. Yes. She thought about the faces. The people she'd smiled at for 18 months, said good morning to traded complaints about sore feet and difficult guests with. She thought about which of them had been watching her, reporting to him. She felt something move through her chest that was too quiet and too cold to be called anger. It was more like the feeling of a floor dropping out from under you in a place you thought was solid. Do you know who? She asked. Not yet. We will. And when you know. Victor looked at her steadily. That will be your decision. What happens next? She hadn't expected that. My decision. It's your situation, he said. I have resources. You have the right to determine how they're used. She stared at him. Something about that, the simple, uncomplicated transfer of agency, landed so unexpectedly that she had to look away for a moment. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see the other man at his table, still on his phone, still not watching. Why do you keep doing that? She said. Doing what? Handing things back to me. The door last night. The decision now. She turned back to him. Most people in your position with your kind of... She gestured vaguely at the room at him, at the general fact of him. They don't hand things back. They manage. They decide. They tell you what's being done, and you're grateful for it. Victor considered that for a moment. Would you prefer that? No, she said immediately. No, I would hate that. I've had enough of that. Then you have your answer, he said, for why I don't do it. She picked her fork back up, finished the eggs in silence that was not uncomfortable. Then, what else? He looked at her. You came down here to tell me something, she said. The information about the informant, that's not the whole thing. What else? Victor set his cup down again. Marcus made a call this morning to a man named Devlin Cole. Devlin runs private collection work on the south side, debt recovery. He paused. And occasionally other kinds of recovery. The toast went dry in her mouth. He hired someone to find me. He hired someone to bring you back, said Victor, which is a different thing. The distinction hit her like cold water. Bring you back. As if she were an object. A possession that had wandered off a shelf. How long do I have? Devlin Cole is good at his job, said Victor. But he works through information networks, not instinct. He needs leads to run down. Right now, the leads he has are limited. A pause. Provided we're careful. Careful, she repeated. That's a relative term. It is, he agreed. Here's what careful looks like for the next 48 hours. He laid it out plainly, the way she'd already noticed he laid everything out. No softening, no performance, just information organized in the order it mattered. The prepaid phone was the only number she could use. She didn't contact anyone from her previous life, not Dana, not anyone, because every contact was a potential threat. She stayed out of her neighborhood entirely. She did not use any card linked to her name. My cards are maxed anyway, she said. Good, that simplifies things. He reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the table. This is for incidentals, cash, no trace. She looked at the envelope, did not touch it. How much? Enough for a week. I'm not taking money from you. It's not a gift, he said. It's a loan, against what you're owed. I'm not owed anything from you. You're owed a week of safety, he said. Every person is owed that much. You can pay it back later or call it even or argue with me about it in 30 days when this is resolved. He slid the envelope closer. But right now, practicality outweighs pride. You know that. She looked at him for a long measuring moment. Then she picked up the envelope, didn't open it, tucked it into the front pocket of the borrowed jeans. Fine. Fine, he said with that not quite smile. Don't look pleased with yourself. I don't do pleased, he said. I do efficient. Same face, I imagine? This time the not quite smile made it all the way. Small, brief, but there. The knock came at 2:17 in the afternoon. Not at Na's door. At Victor's office 2 floors up from the dining room where he'd brought her after breakfast, because as he'd put it with characteristic directness, if you're going to be in the building, you should know the building. And so she did know it now, or the parts of it he'd shown her. The floor plan of the private floors, the 2 exit routes that weren't the main elevator. The name and face of every person on security. She'd absorbed it all the way. She absorbed most things now, quietly, thoroughly filing it in the part of her brain that had been managing emergency logistics for 3 years. Victor was on a call, his third since she'd come up, all in the low-level tone he used for everything that made urgent matters sound like routine inventory. She sat on the couch along the far wall with the prepaid phone going through the almost nothing she had to go through. No contacts, no messages, just the bare interface of a new number with no history. Then Dara came in without knocking, which told Na something about Dara's actual role here. There's a situation, Dara said. Victor ended his call mid-sentence. What kind? Marcus Tide is in the building. The room didn't change. Victor didn't change. But something in the air did a sudden absolute stillness, like the moment before a sound arrives. Na was on her feet before she'd decided to stand. How? Said Victor. One word. He came in through the commercial entrance on the ground floor. Said he was here for the quarterly business review. Dara's voice was clipped precise. He's registered under a company called Tide Consulting. That company doesn't appear in any of our records, but he had a printed confirmation email. Someone generated it for him, Victor said. Yes, we're finding out who. Victor looked at Na. In his eyes was something she hadn't seen there before, Not alarm, but a recalibration. The expression of someone updating a threat assessment in real time. "How did he know I was here?" she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "He may not know," Victor said. "He may be running a pattern checking all properties with connection to the Aldridge vicinity looking for a thread. If he's running Devlin Cole's playbook, it's what he'd do." He stood. "Or he knows. Which would mean the informant in your building has a wider reach than we thought." "So which is it?" "I don't know yet." He moved to the door. "Stay here. Don't move. Don't call anyone. Dara." "I'll stay with her," Dara said. "I don't need a babysitter," Na said. "No," said Victor. "You need a witness. There's a difference." He met her eyes. "I'll handle this." "Victor?" "Nah." Just her name. But the way he said it grounded certain present did something to the adrenaline spiking through her. "I'll handle it." He left. 12 minutes. She knew because she counted. Dara stood near the door and didn't pace and didn't check her phone and didn't make small talk, which Na respected deeply. The silence between them was the professional silence of two people in a situation that required alertness. At minute 8, Na said, "Has this happened before? Someone walking in like this?" "People try things," Dara said. "This building has dealt with more complicated situations than a man with a fake email. Comforting. It's meant to be factual. Also comforting." Dara almost smiled. Almost. At minute 12, Victor came back. He closed the door behind him and looked at Na and said, "He's gone." She exhaled. "What happened?" "I met him in the lobby, introduced myself, told him we had no record of his meeting and that I personally reviewed all commercial registrations for this property and that if he felt his confirmation email had been incorrectly generated, I'd be happy to refer him to our legal office." He paused. "He left. Just like that." "He doesn't know who I am yet," said Victor. When a man like Marcus meets another man who speaks calmly about legal offices and personal oversight, he recalibrates. He's not ready to escalate to someone he hasn't profiled. He sat back down. "He'll research me now. And when he finds out who you are..." Victor looked at her. "Then we'll be in a different conversation." She felt it, the implication of that, the different conversation. What Victor Renner was, what that meant, what it meant for Marcus to look him up and understand. She didn't ask the obvious question because she could see he wasn't ready to answer it, and she had enough variables already. "The fake email," she said instead. "Someone in your building generated it." "Yes." "So Marcus has someone here too." Victor's jaw tightened, fractionally. The first physical expression of something like anger she'd seen from him. "It appears so." "Then I'm not safe here," she said. Flat. No dramatics, just the math. "You're safer here than anywhere else," he said. "The person who generated the email is already identified. They no longer have access to our systems." He paused. "I move quickly when I need to." She believed him. That was the thing. She looked at him, and she simply straightforwardly believed him, which was a sensation so unfamiliar she almost didn't recognize it at first. "Victor," she said, "I need to know something." "Ask." "When Marcus researches you and finds out what you actually are, is he going to be afraid of you?" She held his gaze. "Or is he going to want to compete?" The silence lasted 3 seconds, which from Victor was practically an eternity. "Marcus Tide," he said slowly, "is a man who believes dominance is his natural right. Men like that, when they encounter someone who operates at a higher level of power, they don't retreat." He met her eyes directly. "They escalate." "Then we have a problem," she said. "We have a timeline," he corrected. "Which is different. A problem has no shape. A timeline can be worked with." She looked at him. "You've done this before. This specific thing. Someone being hunted somewhere to be for 48 hours? "Not exactly this," he said carefully, "but close." He was quiet for a moment. "I operate in a world where leverage is currency and information is survival. I have managed situations that required discretion. Yes. He paused. But I want you to understand something now. This is not a business situation for me. He held her gaze. This is personal, which means I'm careful in ways I'm not always careful when it's business. The words landed differently than she expected. Not like a declaration, like a definition. A line being drawn clearly so she could see exactly where she stood. Why personal? She asked. He looked at her for a long moment. Because you reminded me of something, he said. In the car last night, when you said he thinks he owns me, you said it without shame, just fact, like you'd already done the work of separating his belief from the truth. He paused. Most people after years in that situation can't do that. The belief gets inside, becomes part of how they see themselves. His voice was even, but there was something underneath it. You hadn't let it. She looked down at her hands. Thought about that. I almost had, she said quietly. There were months where I almost believed it. That I was his. That leaving was wrong somehow. Against some rule I'd agreed to without knowing. But you didn't. No. She looked back up. I didn't. A pause. Barely. Victor nodded, as if that answer was the one that mattered most. At 4 p.m, Dara came back with a tablet and a look that meant new information. Devlin Cole's team made contact with 2 people from the Aldridge staff, she said, handing the tablet to Victor. 1 housekeeping, 1 valet. Both were asked about a female employee named Na who worked doubles. Both confirmed she existed. The valet mentioned she sometimes took the Wabash exit. Na felt her stomach clench. The Wabash exit. Which was how Marcus had known which door to wait at, which meant the valet had been feeding information for longer than just last night, longer than she'd thought. She sat with that for a moment, the feeling of retrospective exposure of understanding that you'd been visible in places you thought were safe. How long? She said. How long had the valet been reporting? Dara glanced at Victor. Tell her, he said. Based on what we've been able to reconstruct, approximately 4 months. 4 months. She counted backwards. She thought about the routes she'd changed, the times she'd rerouted specifically because something felt wrong. The night 3 months ago when Marcus had shown up at a restaurant she'd only told one person about, and she'd told Dana, and she'd blamed Dana internally for a week before deciding it was coincidence. It hadn't been Dana. It had never been Dana. She pressed her hands flat against her knees. He's been this thorough the whole time, she said. Not a question. Just understanding finally arriving the way understanding sometimes arrived, too complete, too clear, like a light turned on in a room you'd been living in the dark. He's methodical, Victor said, which means he can be outmaneuvered. Methodical people are predictable. He set the tablet down. He'll try to establish contact with you in the next 24 hours. Not Marcus directly through someone you'd trust. He'll use a familiar face. He doesn't have familiar faces I trust anymore. He doesn't know that, said Victor. That's our advantage. She looked at him. You have a plan? I have the beginning of one. Tell me. He leaned forward. For the first time she saw something shift in his posture. Not the controlled stillness of the last 18 hours, but something more present, more engaged. Like a man who'd been waiting for a problem worth the full weight of his attention and had finally found one. Marcus wants you back, he said. He's willing to spend money and risk exposure to get you back, which means he'll take bait if the bait is convincing enough. He paused. I'm hosting an event tomorrow evening, a private gala. It's been scheduled for 6 weeks. 90 guests, invitation only, formal. Marcus has no connection to that world. But if he believes you'll be there, if someone he trusts tells him you were seen arriving, he'll come, she said. He'll come, Victor confirmed. On my ground, with my people, on my terms. His eyes held hers. But it requires you to be visible, briefly controlled in a context where we can manage what happens next. She was quiet for a long moment. You want to use me as bait, she said. I want to use his obsession as bait, Victor said. There's a difference. You wouldn't be exposed. You'd be controlled exposure, she said. I understand the concept. She thought about it. Thought about standing in a room where Marcus might walk in, and thought about the last time she'd been in the same room as him, and the way her entire body had reorganized itself around survival the moment he'd appeared. Then she thought about something else. She thought about doing it on her own terms, surrounded by Victor's people in Victor's space, with a plan underneath her instead of nothing. Tell me the rest, she said. Victor looked at her, and for the first time since she'd climbed into his car, she saw something that might in another face have been called admiration. You don't run, he said. Quiet, almost to himself. I run when I have to, she said. When I don't have to, I'd rather stand. He held her gaze. Then he told her the rest, and somewhere in the middle of listening to Victor Renner explain the architecture of a plan that turned her greatest vulnerability into its own kind of weapon. Na felt something shift in her chest, something small and stubborn, and almost unrecognizable. It took her a moment to identify it. It was the particular feeling of a person who has been running so long that standing still feels dangerous, finally carefully, deliberately planting both feet, and choosing to stay. Outside the window, 4 floors below, a black car idled at the corner for exactly 40 seconds. Then it pulled away. Marcus had been in that car. He'd looked up at the building on his way out, counted floors, made calculations. He'd made a decision too. Tomorrow, he thought. The gala. He'd already heard about it through a contact he'd spent 3 years cultivating for exactly this kind of moment. He would be there. And he would find her. He was absolutely, completely, catastrophically certain of it. She spent that evening learning how to become someone Marcus wouldn't recognize until it was too late. Not a disguise. Victor had been clear about that. A disguise invited suspicion, invited the wrong kind of attention from the wrong people in a room full of people who made their living reading other people. What she needed, he'd said, was not to look different. She needed to look certain, like a woman who belonged, like a woman who had never once in her life pressed herself against a car floor and prayed. Marcus knows how you move when you're afraid. Victor had told her the night before sitting across from her in that spare cedar-smelling suite. He's spent years studying it. If you walk into that room tomorrow carrying fear, he'll find you in 30 seconds regardless of what you're wearing. And if I walk in not afraid, then you control the encounter, he said, and he loses the only advantage he's ever actually had over you. She'd thought about that for a long time after he left. Lying on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling, she'd turned it over and over, the idea that fear had been Marcus's real leverage all along. Not his contacts, not his money, not the friends he deployed like tools. Fear. Her fear, which he had cultivated the way you cultivate anything you want to keep carefully, consistently, making sure it never had room to die. She decided somewhere around midnight that she was done feeding it. So the next morning when Dara appeared with a garment bag and a calm expression, Na didn't hesitate. She unzipped the bag. Dark burgundy dress structured at the shoulder, clean lines. Nothing that required her to perform or preen. The kind of thing a woman wore when she wanted to be taken seriously rather than looked at. He has good taste, she said. He sent 3 options, Dara said. I chose. Na looked at Dara. Then you have good taste. Something warm moved briefly across Dara's face. Get ready. Car leaves at 7. Day. The gala was on the 42nd floor of a building in the Loop that Victor apparently owned in some configuration she hadn't asked about yet. 90 guests, he'd said. Investment people, legal people, a handful of city officials. The kind of room where power didn't announce itself because it didn't need to. Victor met her at the elevator. He was in black jacket shirt, everything precise and dark, and he looked at her for 1 full second when the doors opened, which was the longest she'd seen him look at anything that wasn't a problem. You look ready, he said. I look like I belong, she corrected. Same thing, he said, and turned toward the room. She fell into step beside him, and the moment they walked through the entrance, she understood what he'd meant about his world. The room was full of people who knew how to make money feel like air present everywhere necessary and invisible. No one stared. Everyone noticed. It was a specific social architecture she'd observed only from the outside, from the service side of hotel ballrooms, from behind carts and trays, and the particular anonymity of a uniform. Tonight, she was not behind anything. She stayed close to Victor without clinging close enough to signal connection, far enough to signal agency. He introduced her to 3 people in the first 15 minutes. A man named Arthur, who ran something in finance and had the handshake of a person who'd been using it as a weapon for 40 years. A woman named Claire, who was an attorney, and who looked at Na with the quick, accurate assessment of someone who was very good at reading people, and was doing exactly that right now. And a city alderman whose name Na didn't catch, because at the moment he said it across the room near the bar, she saw a familiar silhouette. Her breath stopped. Then the silhouette turned, and it wasn't Marcus. It was a man who was simply tall, and wore his jacket similarly, and she breathed again. Victor's hand touched her elbow. Barely. A contact so brief it was almost not there. But it was, and it said, "I noticed." "I'm here." She didn't look at him. She just let the breath finish and continued the conversation. "Chung." 40 minutes in, Dara appeared at Victor's shoulder with an expression that carried information. Victor excused himself from the conversation with the kind of seamless grace that left the other person feeling like the departure was their own idea. He moved toward the far side of the room and Na followed without being asked, because she'd already understood that in Victor's world, staying informed was staying safe. "He's in the building," Dara said low. "Came through the commercial lobby on a guest pass registered to a man named Theo Briggs. Briggs is a legitimate contact of one of our attendees. Marcus apparently accessed the guest list through a third party and piggybacked the registration." "How far up is he?" Victor asked. "Security put him at 38. He's taking the stairs." Victor looked at Na. "He's being careful. He doesn't want to be seen on elevator cameras." "He always takes stairs when he's hunting," she said. The word came out before she'd chosen it, and it was exactly the right word. And saying it out loud in this context, in this dress with this man beside her, felt like naming something that had had too much power in the unnamed dark. "He'll come in through the service entrance on this floor," Victor said, "which is currently staffed by 2 of my people." He looked at her steadily. "You're not going to be surprised. Whatever happens next, you see it coming. Understood? Understood. Stay visible. Stay in the center of the room. If he approaches, you don't retreat." His voice was level and quiet. "You don't retreat, Na." "I told you," she said. "When I don't have to run, I stand." He held her gaze for 1 second, then nodded once and moved back toward the center of the room, and she followed, and she positioned herself near a cluster of guests with a clear sightline to every entrance. And she picked up a glass of water. She had no intention of drinking, and she waited. Size. He came in at 8:47. She saw him before he saw her, which was the first time in 3 years that had happened, and the significance of it moved through her like a current. Marcus looked good. He always looked good. That had always been part of it, the way his surface was so composed, so put together, that people around him extended good faith. Automatically, the way you extend good faith to a well-maintained house without asking what's in the walls. He wore a dark suit she didn't recognize, which meant it was new, which meant he'd prepared for this, which meant he'd known or strongly suspected she'd be here. He scanned the room. Slow, methodical. The way she'd described to Victor the way a man moves when he's tracking rather than simply looking. And then his eyes found her. She didn't look away. That was the thing she'd decided the night before staring at the ceiling. She would not look away first. Not tonight. Not in this room. Not with Victor's people positioned at every exit, and Dara somewhere in her peripheral vision, and the full solid weight of the plan underneath her feet. She held his gaze. She watched something move across his face. Surprise first, which he suppressed almost instantly. Then something else. Something she recognized. The particular expression Marcus wore when the world wasn't behaving the way he'd calculated it would. He walked toward her. She stayed still. He stopped 2 feet away and looked at her. Really looked the way he always looked. Like looking was a form of taking. And then he smiled. The patient private smile that had once seemed like intimacy, and now read clearly as what it had always been, control wearing a pleasant face. "There you are," he said. "Here I am." She agreed. He waited for more. For the nervous qualification, the apology, the explanation, the familiar cascade of appeasement that he'd trained her to produce in his presence. She gave him none of it. She held the glass of water and looked at him and said nothing further. Something shifted in his expression. Fractional. "You look different." "I feel different," she said. "Different isn't always better." He stepped slightly closer. "Nah, I've been worried." "No, you haven't," she said. Calm. Clear. "You've been looking. That's not the same thing." His jaw tightened. "Why are you doing this? What is this place? Who are these people?" "Excuse me." Victor's voice arrived from just behind Na's left shoulder, and she felt Marcus register. It saw his eyes move up and his posture recalibrate in the half-second before he composed himself. Victor stepped to Na's side. Not between them. Beside her. A positioning that was specific and deliberate, not shielding but flanking. Equal. "I don't believe we've met," Victor said, extending his hand to Marcus. "Victor Renner." Marcus shook it because not shaking it would have been the wrong move, and he knew it. Marcus tied. "Marcus." Victor said the name with the same flat neutrality he applied to everything, and somehow, in that neutrality, was something colder than contempt, the total absence of impression. As if Marcus were simply a fact to be noted and categorized. "Are you a guest this evening?" "I was invited," Marcus said. "By a business associate." "Which associate?" Victor asked, pleasantly. The pleasantness of a man who already knew the answer and was interested in what answer he'd be given instead. Marcus held his smile. "Theo Briggs." "Interesting," said Victor. Theo Briggs's invitation was for Theo and his wife. It didn't include additional guests. He tilted his head. "I'm meticulous about my guest lists. I always have been." The room around them continued its normal noise conversation, the occasional laugh glass against glass. No one was watching. Everyone nearby could hear. Marcus looked at Na. "Can we speak privately?" "No," she said. He blinked. It was a small thing, a micro-expression there and gone, but she caught it, and it gave her something she hadn't felt in 3 years, the clear, unambiguous satisfaction of having been the one to cause it. "Nah." His voice dropped. The intimate register. The one he used when he wanted to remind her that they had a private language, a shared history, a bond that excluded the people around them. "Whatever he's told you, whatever situation you think you're in right now, this isn't real. These people aren't your people." "And you are," she said. "I've always been." "You've always been someone I was afraid of," she said. Not loudly, not with drama, just the flat, clear delivery of a fact she was done keeping polite. "That's not the same as being my person, Marcus." His face changed. Not the micro-expression this time, something larger, something that moved through his features like weather. She'd seen it before. The moment the patient composure cracked and what was underneath began to show. "You don't know what you're doing," he said. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said. "For the first time in 3 years, I know exactly what I'm doing." Victor turned slightly toward Marcus, and the movement was so small and so complete that it changed the entire geometry of the interaction. "Mr. Tide," he said quietly, "I'm going to ask you to leave my event. My security team will escort you to the lobby." A pause. "You should know that this conversation has been documented. Any further contact with Ms. Na at her residence at her place of employment through third parties or through the 2 individuals you've been paying for information will be addressed through channels you won't enjoy." Marcus stared at him. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I have a very complete picture," Victor said. "Devlin Cole, the Aldridge contacts. The registration this evening through Mr. Briggs's credentials. He said each item the way you lay cards on a table unhurried one at a time, letting the accumulation do the work. I've been building that picture for 36 hours. Would you like me to continue? The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds in which Marcus Tide, for possibly the first time in his adult life, stood in a room and understood that he was not the most informed person in it. She watched it happen. Watched the recalculation move across his face, the slow, ugly understanding that the woman he'd tracked across the city, the woman he'd stationed informants around, the woman he'd hired a recovery specialist to locate, had landed somewhere he hadn't mapped. In a world that operated by rules he didn't know. With a man who had already seen everything Marcus thought was invisible. 2 men in dark jackets appeared at Marcus's flanks, not aggressive, not even particularly visible to the rest of the room. Just present, in exactly the right position. Marcus looked at Na one more time. And she saw it, the thing underneath all of it, underneath the patience and the planning and the absolute certainty. She saw that it wasn't love. It had never been love. It was the terror of a man who defined himself by what he controlled, suddenly facing the possibility that this particular thing was no longer controllable. She felt something release in her chest, something that had been held taut for 3 years. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said. He left. Flanked and quiet and without looking back, which was the first time he'd ever left a room without making sure she was watching him go. She stood and breathed. Victor turned to her. "Are you all right?" She considered the question seriously, the way it deserved to be considered. "Yes," she said. And then, because it was true, "I didn't shake." "No," he said. "You didn't." "I thought I would." "I didn't," he said, simply, like it was a fact he'd already known. She looked at him, this still certain, precisely calibrated man, and thought about what it had taken to stand in that moment without retreat, and thought about who had given her the ground to stand on, and thought about all the ways that kind of debt could be complicated, and all the reasons she should be careful, and all the things she still didn't know about Victor Renner and his world, and what it would cost her to stay in it. Then she thought about Marcus's face when she'd said goodbye, the micro-expression, the crack, and decided that the complications could wait another hour. "You said there'd be an open bar," she said. Victor looked at her. "I did not say that. Someone said it. It's possible Dara said it. I'd like to find out if Dara was correct." And Victor Renner controlled deliberate expression economical. Victor Renner made the sound that she was almost certain was the closest he came to a laugh. Brief, real, like a window opened and closed quickly before anyone could see what was behind it. "This way," he said, and she walked beside him through the 90 people who moved and spoke and conducted the business of their world, and she felt the burgundy dress move around her legs and the solid floor beneath her heels, and she thought, "I stood. I did not retreat." And then she thought very quietly, in the part of herself she was just beginning to reclaim, "I think I could get used to standing." But at 11:14, when she was in the elevator heading back down with Victor and Dara, Victor's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Something in his face shifted, not the micro-expression, not the weather change, but something beneath both of those, a deeper adjustment. "What?" she said, not a question, a demand. He turned the phone so she could see the message. It was from a number she didn't recognize. 6 words. "She can't hide behind you forever." And below it a photograph. The photograph was of Na, standing in the room tonight, water glass in hand in the moment before Marcus had reached her, taken from across the room from a position that could only have been the service entrance side. Which meant Marcus hadn't come alone. Which meant, while she was facing Marcus, while all of Victor's people were watching Marcus, someone else, someone she'd never seen. Someone who didn't appear on any list had been in the room with a camera. She looked at the photograph for a long moment. Her own face unaware in the moment, just before everything had shifted. Then she handed the phone back. "He planned a secondary," she said. "Yes." He anticipated being removed and made sure he still got something. "Yes," said Victor. His voice was even. But something in it had changed. Something had solidified. "He's not going to stop," she said. "No," said Victor. "He's not." The elevator opened on the lobby. The three of them stepped out into the quiet, and Na looked at the city through the glass of the building's front entrance, wet, still lit, and moving indifferent in that particular Chicago way, and she understood what was true. Tonight had not been the end of anything. Tonight had been a declaration, and Marcus had heard it and sent one back. She had stood. She had not retreated. She had said goodbye. And Marcus had answered, "We're not done." She turned to Victor. His eyes were already on her steady present, already calculating the next 48 hours with the focused, unhurried intelligence she'd come to recognize as the thing that made him genuinely dangerous to people who underestimated it. "Then we keep going," she said. It was not a question. It was not a request. It was the voice of a woman who had felt fear for 3 years, and felt it leave her body for the first time tonight, and was not willing to let it come back. Victor looked at her. And for the third time since she'd climbed into his car in the rain, she saw that settling in him that infinitesimal, almost invisible shift of a man whose calculation had returned, the answer he'd believed was there, but needed to confirm. "Then we keep going," he said. And that was enough. That was exactly enough. Because Na had learned in the last 48 hours the difference between a man who made promises and a man who made facts, and Victor Renner dealt exclusively in facts. This one was simple. This one was clear. They were not done. But neither was she. And for the first time in 3 years, that didn't feel like a threat. It felt like the beginning of something she was choosing. The photograph changed everything. Not because it scared her, though it did, in the cold, clarifying way that real danger scared her, the way that cut through noise and left only fact. It changed everything because it proved something she'd needed, proven Marcus was not improvising. He had never been improvising. Every move he'd made since Wabash had been part of a structure, a layered, premeditated architecture of pursuit that had a secondary when the primary failed a backup, when the secondary was removed, a contingency beneath every contingency. She understood now why she'd never been able to leave cleanly before. She hadn't been failing. She'd been outplanned. Victor understood this too. She could see it in the quality of his silence in the car ride back, not the comfortable silence of the first night, not the working silence of the planning sessions. This was the silence of a man recalibrating the scale of a problem he'd initially assessed as manageable and was now reassessing as something else entirely. "Say it," she said. He looked at her. "Whatever you're recalculating, say it." He was quiet for another moment. Then, Marcus Tide spent 4 months building an information network around a hotel housekeeper. He said it without judgment, just the clean delivery of a fact. That's not obsession operating alone. That's obsession with funding and infrastructure. "He has money," she said. "Family money. He doesn't work, not really. He manages things his father left him." "What kind of things?" She thought about it. "Real estate. Some commercial properties. I was never completely sure. He didn't explain finances to me, he just had them. Whenever I asked, he'd say money was his concern and mine was just to be present." She paused. That should have been a louder alarm. "It usually is in retrospect," Victor said, not unkind, just true. "So he has resources," she said. "Real ones. Which means Devlin Cole is not a 1-week hire he can sustain this." "Yes. And the person in the room tonight, the one with the camera, we don't know who that is." "Not yet." She looked out at the city moving past. "So the plan that felt solid 12 hours ago has a hole in it." "It has new information," Victor said. "Which means it needs revision." "Victor," she turned to him, "how long can you sustain this realistically? You have a business, a building, 43 other things I don't know about. How long before protecting me becomes a cost you're not willing to carry?" He held her gaze without flinching. "That's the right question." "I know it's the right question. I'm asking for the answer." "I don't have a timeline," he said. "That's honest." Honest isn't always sufficient. No, he agreed. It isn't. He looked at her steadily. But I can tell you this, I don't start things I intend to abandon, and I don't make calculations based on convenience. A pause. Marcus is now a problem that has arrived in my building at my event and sent a message to my phone. That makes him my problem regardless of what you decide about your own situation. She stared at him. You're saying he made it personal for you. I'm saying he made an error in judgment, Victor said. Men like Marcus always do. They mistake patience for passivity. They see stillness and assume it means nothing is moving. He turned to look out the window. Things are moving. She sat with that, felt the car turn, felt the city continuing its indifferent business around them. I need to call Dana, she said. Victor looked at her immediately. That's the one thing I asked you not to do. Dana is my best friend. Marcus has been using my contacts to track me, which means if he can't find me through his usual channels, he'll go to her next. If she doesn't know to expect it, she's vulnerable. She held his gaze. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. A beat. Then two. Victor looked at her with the expression she was beginning to understand was his version of being surprised, the slight, almost imperceptible stillness of a man who had expected one thing and received another. The prepaid phone, he said. Keep it under 4 minutes. Don't tell her where you are. Tell her you're safe. And tell her not to confirm your existence to anyone she doesn't personally know, regardless of what they say. He paused. And tell her to get somewhere other than her apartment tonight. Can you help with that? She asked. Somewhere she can go. He didn't hesitate. Yes. She took out the prepaid phone and dialed. Dana picked up on the second ring, which meant she'd been awake, which meant she'd been worried, and the sound of Dana's voice, familiar and immediate and sharp with anxiety, hit Na somewhere behind the sternum in a way she hadn't been prepared for. Oh my God, Na, where are you? I've been calling your phone for 2 days. I'm safe, Na said. I'm safe, listen to me. Marcus came here, Dana said. Yesterday morning. He came to my door and he was so calm. Nah, that's the part that scared me. He was just so calm, and he said he was worried about you, and asked if I knew where you were, and I said I didn't, and he said, she stopped. Breath. He said, when you hear from her, and you will tell her I'm not angry. Tell her I understand. Tell her to call me. Na closed her eyes. I'm not angry. The same words from the alley. The same exact phrasing delivered to Dana like a message calculated to travel through her voice and carry the weight of his patience directly to Na. Dana, listen carefully. Do not confirm to anyone that you've heard from me. Pack a bag tonight, enough for 3 or 4 days. I'm going to text you an address. Go there. Na, what is happening? I'll explain everything when I can. Right now I just need to know you're somewhere safe. She paused. Do you trust me? A beat. You know I trust you. Then pack the bag. She ended the call and looked at Victor. Address. He had his own phone out already. Back in the building. Back on the 14th floor. Na sat on the edge of the bed in the burgundy dress and finally took off the heels she'd been wearing for 5 hours and let the silence of the room settle around her. She should sleep. She knew she should sleep. But the photograph was still in her head, her own face looking across the room, unaware, and the knowledge of the camera, the unknown person. The secondary plan Marcus had embedded inside his primary plan, like a tooth inside a tooth. She was still sitting there at 1 a.m. when the knock came. Victor's knock. 3 measured beats. Come in, she said, because she'd left it unlocked deliberately consciously, a choice she'd noticed herself making and not reversed. He came in and sat in the chair across from the bed and looked at her with the particular attention he gave things that mattered complete unhurried receiving. Dana's settled, she asked. She arrived 40 minutes ago. Dara sent someone. A pause. She's fine. Good. Na looked at her hands. Victor, who was in the room tonight, the person with the camera. We've been working on that since we got back. He leaned forward slightly. There was a service worker on loan from an outside catering firm. Female, late 20s, registered under a name that checks out to a real person. But the real person is in Milwaukee and has never worked catering in her life. The cold clarity again. Marcus had someone in your staff. Someone in the contracted catering staff, Victor said. Not mine directly, but the distinction is technical, not practical. She was in my room. He planned this weeks ago, she said. He would have needed to. Getting a person into a contracted catering firm building a cover that uses a real person's identity that takes time. She looked up at him. Which means he wasn't just reacting to losing me 2 nights ago. He had contingency plans already in place. Yes, said Victor. He was already building for a scenario where I disappeared. Yes. He's been planning to contain me for a long time, she said. Not with horror, with the clear, almost relieved understanding of seeing a shape completely for the first time. It's not about love. It's never been about love. I'm a position he holds, like a property. And losing me isn't heartbreak. It's a security breach. Victor was very still. Yes, he said. That's exactly what it is. And when you contain a security breach, she said, you don't give up because you're escalated once. You escalate back. Yes. She stood up, walked to the window. So what do we know that he doesn't know we know? We know his catering plant. We have her on camera leaving full footage. We know Devlin Cole's current location, which is a motel on Cicero that my people have had eyes on since this afternoon. And we know, Victor paused. We know something I was going to tell you tomorrow. She turned from the window. Tell me now. He looked at her for a moment. Marcus's financial situation is not what he's presented. The family holdings, the commercial real estate, the managed assets, 3 of the 4 primary properties, are in the middle of a dispute with the city over unpermitted development. His liquid position is significantly constrained. He's been spending on this. He paused. On finding you. At a rate that isn't sustainable. She stared at him. He's burning through money to chase me. He's been burning through it for longer than 2 days, Victor said. The information network around the Aldridge, 4 months of that doesn't come cheap. Devlin Cole's retainer isn't cheap. The catering plant wasn't cheap. His voice was level. He is spending the remains of a constrained financial position to keep hold of someone he's categorized as a possession. Which means time is our ally, she said. If we can outlast his funding. He makes an error, Victor said. Cash-constrained people make errors. They cut corners on the parts of the plan they think matter least. They let things slip. He held her eyes. We don't need to defeat him directly. We need to be standing when his own structure collapses. She thought about that. Thought about 3 years of running and how exhausting it had been. And thought about the strange inverse of that, the idea that stillness staying, being present, could be its own form of victory. You've done this before, she said. In business, outweighting someone. It's often the most effective strategy against an opponent who believes momentum is on their side, he said. Momentum requires fuel. We let him burn his. She nodded slowly. Then, what's the error you're waiting for? He'll make contact again, Victor said. Not Marcus directly, someone he sends. He'll try a softer approach after the escalation failed. Someone you know, someone you trust. Someone designed to make you feel like coming back is your own choice. He paused. He's done this before, when you left the previous times. She stiffened. How do you know about the previous times? Because I asked Dara to build a profile, he said. Based on what you told me and public records. I should have told you I was doing that. The transparency of the admission, the simple direct acknowledgement that he'd done something without telling her, and should have disarmed her in a way she hadn't anticipated. She'd been ready to be angry. The readiness dissolved. What did the profile show? Each time you left before Marcus used a person close to you to re-establish contact within 72 hours. A friend, a colleague, your mother once. He paused. He's very good at identifying the people who matter to you and using them as channels. Dana, she said. Dana's covered. She won't be reachable in a way that's useful to him. He paused. But there's someone else. She went still. Who? Your mother, he said. She's in Evanston. She still lives at the same address she's lived at for 12 years, and she has no idea any of this is happening. The air in the room changed. Her mother, who she'd been protecting by keeping her distance that she'd thought was safety, and now understood was just a gap in the fence that Marcus had almost certainly already identified. Her mother, who would open the door to Marcus because he'd been charming to her once in the early days, before Na understood what charm was covering. He'll go to her, Na said. If he can't find me any other way, he may already be planning to. Victor's voice was careful, steady. This is why I'm telling you now. She pressed both hands against the window glass. Can you get to her, the way you got to Dana? Yes, but it requires your permission and your mother's cooperation, and your mother doesn't know you're in this situation. He paused. You'll need to call her. She closed her eyes. Her mother, who she'd been not calling for 6 months because every call was a risk, and every risk felt like it could unravel something. Her mother, who she loved with the complicated, aching love of someone who'd been trying to protect what they loved by staying away from it. She turned from the window. Give me a minute. Victor stood. Take what you need. He moved toward the door. Victor? He stopped. When this is over... She stopped, started again. If this is over, when Marcus's money runs out and his plan collapses and Devlin Cole moves on to the next job, what happens to you? To this. She gestured between them, the room, the building, the last 2 days. What does this look like when it's finished? He turned around, looked at her with the complete, unhurried attention that she was beginning to understand was his most fundamental form of honesty. I don't know, he said. That's the first time in a long time I've said that and meant it as something other than a problem. She looked at him. What does it mean this time? It means, he said slowly, that I'd like the chance to find out. She held his gaze and felt something in her chest, that small, stubborn, gradually strengthening thing move again. Go, she said. I need to call my mother. He left. The door didn't close all the way. She picked up the prepaid phone and sat on the edge of the bed and dialed a number she had memorized at 7 years old and had been afraid to call for 6 months. And when her mother's voice answered thick with sleep, immediately sharp with the alert attention of a woman who has always known when her child is in trouble. Na felt 3 years of held breath start to move. Mama, she said. It's me. I need to tell you something. I need you to listen and not be scared. I'm safe. I promise I'm safe, but I need you to listen. Her mother said, Nah, baby, I know. I've known something was wrong. I've been waiting for this call. And Na closed her eyes and felt that the particular pain and relief of being known, of being seen through the distance you thought was protecting someone, of understanding that love does not require information to operate. Her mother had known. Of course her mother had known. Can someone come to you tonight? Na asked. Someone I trust. Send them, her mother said without hesitation. And Na, when this is done, you come home. You hear me? I hear you, Mama. She ended the call, sat with the phone in both hands for a moment. Then she went to the door and opened it and said, Victor. He was in the hallway, not pacing, just present, as if he'd known she'd need something when the call was done. She'll cooperate, Na said. Send someone. He had his phone out before she finished the sentence. She watched him work the low, precise instructions, the complete absence of wasted words, and thought about the fact that 48 hours ago, she'd been on the floor of his car with both hands over her mouth with $340 and no plan, and 3 years of running calcified in her bones. And thought about standing in front of Marcus tonight, not retreating. And thought about her mother's voice, I've been waiting for this call. And thought about Victor saying, I'd like the chance to find out. She was building something. She could feel it. Not just surviving, actually building. The architecture was still fragile, still dependent on variables she couldn't control, still under threat from a man with dwindling money and undiminishing obsession. But it was there, real and accumulating the way real things accumulate, not in a single moment of transformation, but in the layering of small deliberate choices. She had made the choice in the car. She had made it again when she latched the door, when she stood at the gala, when she called Dana, when she called her mother, every choice adding weight to the foundation. Victor ended his call, looked at her. "Done." "Thank you," she said. He nodded, started to turn. "One more thing," she said. He turned back. "The person in the room tonight, the woman with the camera." She met his eyes. "I want to talk to her." Something moved in Victor's expression. Not alarm reassessment. "She's currently—" "I know where she is," Na said. "You have her. You've had her since, what, 11:30? She watched his face. "I want to talk to her, not to threaten her, not to— I just want to understand who he's using and why. Because every person Marcus uses, he uses the same way. He finds something they need, and he becomes the person who provides it, and then the providing becomes the leash." She paused. "I want to know what she needed." Victor looked at her for a long moment. "Why?" "Because she's not my enemy," Na said. "She's a person Marcus found a use for, and I know what that feels like." She held his gaze. "Will you let me talk to her?" The silence lasted long enough that she thought he'd say no. Then, "Tomorrow morning, I'll be with you." "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "I'll be with you." She nodded. He turned and walked down the hall, and she stood in the doorway of a room that was beginning gradually and carefully to feel like somewhere she existed rather than somewhere she was hiding. And then Victor's phone rang. She saw him stop. See the screen. Something in the line of his back changed a shift so small she almost missed it. He answered. Said 3 words she couldn't hear from the doorway. Listened. Said nothing further for 15 seconds. Then he turned around and walked back to her, and his face was its usual controlled composition. But his eyes had the quality of someone who had just received a piece of information that required the entire problem to be rebuilt from the foundation. "What?" she said, flat, already bracing. "Devlin Cole," Victor said. "He's not at the Cicero Motel." "What do you mean he's not?" "He checked out 4 hours ago." Victor's voice was even. Exact. "My people missed the movement. He paid in cash and exited through the back." A pause. "And in the last 20 minutes, there have been 2 separate inquiries made to the building's front security, one in person, one by phone, asking whether Victor Renner was currently in residence." She felt it land, felt the shape of it. Devlin Cole was not running down leads anymore. He wasn't building a picture. He had the picture. He had the address, the building, the floor. Marcus had redirected his asset from search to approach, and while they'd been managing the gala and the photograph, and Dana and her mother, while they'd been managing all of it carefully and methodically, the most dangerous piece on Marcus's board had quietly moved into position. "He's not coming for me," she said. Victor looked at her. "Marcus knows he can't take me directly from your building. He knows that doesn't end well for him." She felt the calculation crystallize. "He's going to try to remove you, make this space unsafe, make you a liability I can't afford." She held Victor's gaze. "He's not coming for me, Victor. He's coming for you." The silence lasted 1 second. Then Victor said quietly and completely, "Yes. That's what I think too." And for the first time since she'd found herself on his car floor 2 nights ago, she saw something in Victor Renner's eyes that she recognized from the mirror. Not fear, but the close, clear-eyed knowledge of it. The acknowledgement that the ground beneath them had shifted again. And the decision, immediate, unspoken, mutual, to stand on it anyway. The next 4 hours were the quietest kind of dangerous. Victor moved through them the way he moved through everything, without waste, without visible alarm, with the focused efficiency of a man who had spent enough years in high-stakes situations to know that panic was just another form of inaction wearing a louder coat. He made calls, short ones, the kind where the other person understood immediately and responded in kind. Dara materialized within minutes and was given instructions. Na caught only in pieces rotation coverage, the east corridor, the parking structure. Names she didn't know, attached to positions she was only beginning to understand. Na watched all of it and did not ask to be removed from it, which she could see Victor noted. "What do you need from me?" she asked. He looked up from his phone. "Right now, nothing. Stay close, stay visible to my people, and tell me immediately if anything feels wrong, anything even small." "I've been reading wrong-feeling things for 3 years," she said. "My calibration is decent." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm asking." She stayed. She watched. She cataloged everything she could see, the positioning of people, the rhythm of check-ins, the small adjustments Victor made as information came in. And somewhere in the middle of watching him work, she thought about the woman with the camera. The one currently somewhere in this building, the one Marcus had used and who had perhaps not fully understood what she was being used for. "The woman from the gala," she said. "What's her name?" Victor answered without looking up. "Priya." "Is she scared?" A pause. "Probably." "Then I want to talk to her now, not tomorrow morning now, while everything is moving." She met his eyes when he looked up. "Because if Devlin Cole is repositioning and Marcus is escalating, I need to understand the full picture. And Priya is a piece of it I don't have yet." Victor studied her for a moment. "Dara," he said. Dara appeared from the hallway with the reliability of someone who was never actually far. "Take Na to see Priya." He looked at Na. "I'll be 10 minutes behind you." Priya was 26, and looked like someone who had made a decision she'd understood was wrong in the moment of making it and had been living in the consequences ever since. She sat in a plain room on the 11th floor with her hands folded on the table and her eyes moving between Na and the door with the particular alertness of someone measuring exits. Na sat down across from her without preamble. "I'm not here to threaten you," she said. "I'm not here to make anything worse for you than it already is. I just want to understand." Priya's jaw tightened. "I don't have anything to say." "You don't have to say anything," Na said. "But I'm going to tell you something first, and then you can decide." She leaned forward slightly. "I know how Marcus finds people. He looks for what someone needs, something specific and real money security protection for someone they love. And he positions himself as the solution. He makes you feel like what he's asking is small compared to what he's providing." She paused. "And for a while, it is small. And then it isn't. And by the time it isn't, you're already in." Priya's folded hands tightened. That was all. But it was enough. "How long has he had something on you?" Na asked. A long silence. Then very quietly, 8 months. 8 months. 4 months of the information network around the Aldridge, and 4 months before that, which meant Marcus had been building the infrastructure to recapture Na before she'd even attempted her last escape. He'd been planning for a version of this night before she'd given him any reason to. "What did he give you?" Na asked. Priya looked at the table. "My brother. He has debt. Not normal debt. The kind where people show up." She swallowed. "Marcus said he'd cover it. Said all I had to do was keep him informed. About you." She looked up, and there was something in her eyes that was not quite an apology, but was close the look of someone who knew the shape of what they'd done and was carrying it. "I didn't know it was going to go this far. I thought it was just information. I didn't think—" "You didn't think he was dangerous," Na said. "He seemed—" Priya stopped. "He seemed like someone who loved you. In the beginning." "They always do," Na said, flat, not cruel, just the truth in its simplest form. "In the beginning." Priya looked at her for a long moment. "I'm sorry." "I know." Na sat back. "Here's what I need you to understand. Marcus's financial situation is not what he presented to you. The coverage he promised your brother, I can't tell you whether it's real or leverage to keep you compliant. But I can tell you that a man who is burning through constrained resources to chase a person he's decided is a possession is not a man who honors his commitments when they're no longer useful to him. She held Priya's gaze. When he's done with you, he'll leave your brother exactly where he found him. Priya went pale. What I'm offering, Na said, is different. Victor Renner has resources and contacts and 11 years of history with people in this city who know how to make certain kinds of problems solvable. Your brother's situation... She paused. I can't promise, but I can ask. And Victor asking is worth more than Marcus promising. Silence. The particular silence of a decision being made. What do you need from me? Priya said finally. Everything you know about Devlin Cole. Priya knew more than Na expected. 8 months of proximity to Marcus's operation had given her a view into the infrastructure that even Victor's external surveillance hadn't captured. The secondary phone Marcus used, the physical location of the office space he'd been using as a coordination point. And most critically, Devlin Cole's real name. Cole was a pseudonym. His actual name was Raymond Kirsch, and he had a history in the city that Victor, when Na relayed it 10 minutes later, recognized immediately. Kirsch, Victor said, and the way he said it told her everything about the weight of that name. You know him. I know of him. He worked private security and recovery for a man named Boland for 6 years. Boland and I had a professional disagreement 4 years ago. Boland lost. He paused. Kirsch would know my name. He would not approach this building directly. He'd look for a different angle. What angle? Victor's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Something in his face did the thing it did, the deep, complete recalibration, the shifting of tectonic plates beneath a still surface. What? She said. He turned the phone toward her. A text from an unknown number. 2 lines. Your building's east parking structure. Level 3. There's something here you should see before I call the fire marshal. Below it, a photograph of a white panel van. In the back of the van, partially visible through the open rear doors equipment, she didn't recognize, but Victor clearly did, because his jaw set in a way she hadn't seen before. What is that? She asked. Surveillance equipment, he said. High grade, the kind you use to establish a command post. He was already typing. Kirsch isn't just watching the building, he's set up inside the structure. He looked up. He's been here longer than we thought, since before the gala possibly. The understanding arrived fully formed and cold while they'd been watching the front. Kirsch had been inside the walls. He has ears in the building, she said. Possibly. Which means... She stopped, thought through it. Which means he heard the plan. Or parts of it. Whatever was said in this building in the last 24 hours. Victor was already on a call. Terse, rapid, the lowest register she'd heard from him. She caught sweep the whole floor start with 14 assume everything is compromised until we confirm otherwise. She sat with that. Assume everything is compromised. Which meant the careful layered architecture they'd been building, the plan to outlast Marcus, the coverage around Dana and her mother. The conversation with Priya, all of it had potentially been audible to a man sitting in a van in the parking structure with a receiver and a very patient disposition. She stood. Victor. He held up a finger, not dismissive, just one moment. She waited. She counted the seconds. She thought about what Kirsch had heard, and then she thought about something else. She thought about the text. The unknown number, the photograph, the deliberately offered information about the fire marshal. She crossed to Victor and waited for the fraction of a second when he pulled the phone from his ear. The text, she said. He focused on her. Someone sent you that text. Someone who was near enough to that van to photograph it and chose to send it to you instead of anything else. She held his gaze. That's not Kirsch. Kirsch doesn't advertise his own position. And it's not Marcus. Marcus would never. She paused. Who else knows about this situation? Victor was very still. A limited number of people. Limited to who? He looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly. Dara. 3 members of my security team. Gerald at the Aldridge. He paused. And 1 other person. She waited. My attorney, he said. Elena Marsh. She's been aware in a general capacity she handles situations that require legal preparation, and I flagged this one 48 hours ago as potentially requiring documentation. He paused. She has my private contact number. Is it possible she found something, went to the structure herself? Elena doesn't do field work, Victor said. But she has people. Can you reach her? He dialed. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He tried again. Same. She's not answering, he said. And for the first time, she heard something in his voice that was unambiguously close to concern, not performed, not strategic, real. Victor. Her voice came out steady. What if the text isn't from someone helping us? What if it's bait? Draw you to level 3, isolated with your security pulled in different directions by the sweep. She saw it hit him, saw the recalculation happen in real time across his face. He grabbed his phone. Cancel the sweep, he said into it. Hold all positions. Nobody moves until I say. He ended the call and looked at her. You just saved me from walking into an extremely stupid situation. You'd have caught it. Maybe 30 seconds later, he said. That's 30 seconds I'd rather have. She felt the adrenaline moving through her like current. So the text is a draw, which means Kirsch knows we know about the van, which means he burned his own position deliberately, Victor said, which means the van was already finished with its purpose. Whatever he needed to hear, he's already heard it. He looked at her, and now he's trying to pull me out of position before the next move. What is the next move? She said. If you were Marcus, what would you do right now? Victor looked at her steadily. I would stop trying to retrieve you directly. I would create a situation that destabilized your support structure, made staying here untenable, made Victor Renner a problem rather than a solution. He paused. And then I would wait for you to run, because running is what you've always done. Except I'm not running this time, she said. He doesn't know that yet, Victor said. He still believes you're operating on 3 years of trained behavior. Something moved in his eyes. Which is the only real advantage we have left. She understood it immediately. He thinks I'll bolt when the pressure hits a certain level. Yes. So we let him think the pressure is working. Victor looked at her. What are you proposing? I leave the building, she said, visibly, in a way that Kirsch can report back. I go somewhere Marcus would expect me to go when I'm scared, somewhere that looks like me reverting to old behavior. She held Victor's gaze. And when Marcus moves to intercept, you're there. I'm not putting you in the open as bait, Victor said. Flat. The first unambiguous refusal she'd heard from him. You're not putting me anywhere, she said, equally flat. I'm choosing to go. There's a difference, you told me that yourself. He looked at her for a long time. She could see him working through it, the risks, the variables, the ways it could go wrong. And she let him work because he was better at that calculation than she was, and she knew it. Not alone, he said finally. Obviously not alone. I'm with you. Physically present, not in a car down the street next to you. I was hoping you'd say that, she said. Something moved across his face. Brief. Not the not-quite smile, something more complex than that. Like a man looking at something he hadn't expected to find and wasn't sure yet what to do with. Dara, he said. She appeared. Get the car, and call Elena again. Keep trying until she answers. They left the building at 3:47 in the morning through the main entrance, which was the point visibility legibility, the appearance of exactly what Marcus would expect. Na in the burgundy dress heels back on because they were what she'd been wearing all night, and changing would have broken the picture. Victor beside her, not shielding, not hovering present. Equal. In the car, she said, "Where are we going?" "You tell me." Victor said. "Where would you go? 3 years ago when you ran, where did you go first?" She thought. Dana's. "Then that's where we go," he said. Except Dana isn't there, which means Marcus's people arrive at an empty apartment and report back, and Marcus has to recalibrate, and Kirsch has to relocate, and in the time that takes, his phone rang. He answered on the first ring, listened, and she watched his expression do something she hadn't seen it do before, not the subtle tectonic shift, not the controlled recalibration. Something broke through, just for a second, just 1 second of something genuinely unguarded. "Say that again," he said into the phone. His voice had changed. It was the same register, the same control, but something underneath it had shifted in a way that she felt rather than heard. He listened for 30 seconds. Then, "Where is she now?" A pause. "Don't move her. I'll be there in 12 minutes. He lowered the phone. "Victor." Her voice was careful. "What happened?" "Elena," he said. "My attorney." He looked at the road. "She went to the parking structure herself. She found the van and photographed it and sent the text." A pause. "Kirsch found her. The air left the car." "Is she?" "She's alive," he said. "She's hurt. Security found her on level 2. His voice was exact and controlled, and underneath the exactness, she could hear something she recognized, the specific quality of someone managing feeling that is too large for the moment and has to be managed, or it will swallow the moment whole. "She went herself because she was trying to help you," Na said quietly. "Yes." "She didn't tell you because she knew you'd say it was too dangerous." "Yes." His jaw tightened. "She's been my attorney for 14 years. She knows me well enough to know exactly how to circumvent my better judgment." "Victor." She waited until he looked at her. "This is what I meant. When I said Marcus wasn't coming for me, he's coming for everything around you. Everyone who matters. He's doing to you what he did to me, isolating, removing support, making the ground unstable." She held his gaze. "He's been studying you. He figured out who Elena is and what she means to you, and he used Kirsch to send a message." "Yes," Victor said. Quiet. Precise. "I know. So what do we do?" He looked at her. And she saw it again, that stillness, that complete present tense focus. But this time it was different. This time, there was something underneath it that she hadn't seen before. Something that looked in the low light of the moving car remarkably like the same expression she'd worn on the car floor 2 nights ago. Not fear, but the honest acknowledgement of what was at stake. "We stopped managing it," he said. "We've been responding, adjusting, letting him set the tempo." His voice had the quality of a decision being made in real time. "That ends tonight." "How?" "Marcus's financial position is the pressure point," he said. "We've been waiting for it to collapse on its own. We stop waiting." He looked at her. "The 3 properties in dispute with the city. I know the alderman handling the oversight process. I've known him for 7 years. One call and the timeline on that dispute accelerates significantly." He paused. "Within 72 hours, Marcus's liquid position becomes critical. Devlin Cole Kirsch doesn't work for free. When the payment stops, he stops. And Marcus. Marcus without money is Marcus without infrastructure," Victor said. "Without Kirsch, without informants, without the catering plants and the fake registrations and the secondary plans, he's a man with an obsession and no tools to act on it." He looked at her steadily. "And an obsession without tools is just a feeling." She absorbed that. "You could have done this from the beginning," she said. "The alderman call, day 1. "Yes," he said. "Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I was trying to give Marcus an opportunity to make the right choice," he said. "Which was naive, and Elena is hurt because of it." Something moved across his face, not the weather change she'd seen before, not the micro-expression. Something cleaner and harder than both. "I don't make the same error twice." She nodded. "Make the call." He made the call. 4 minutes. The kind of call that sounded like 2 old colleagues discussing scheduling, and contained beneath that the specific transfer of information that would move city machinery in a particular direction at a particular speed. She listened to Victor work and thought about power, not the loud, visible kind Marcus performed, but this kind, the kind that lived in relationships built over years in trust, cultivated through consistency in the network of mutual respect that genuine reliability created. Marcus had built a network of leverage. Victor had built a network of trust. And trust, she was understanding, outlasted leverage every time, because leverage required constant maintenance and trust required only not betraying it. When he ended the call, she said, "What now?" "Now we go to Elena, and then we wait." He looked at her. 72 hours. "And if Marcus does something before the 72 hours, then we deal with what he does," Victor said. "But I believe he'll feel the financial movement before he acts again. Men like Marcus are very sensitive to the ground shifting beneath them. They've built their entire sense of self on standing above others, and the moment they feel the elevation drop, they become cautious." He paused. "Cautious is manageable." She nodded slowly. Then she said, "Victor, Elena being hurt, that's on Marcus, not on you." He looked at her. "You can carry the responsibility of the response without carrying the guilt of the cause," she said. "They're different weights." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're good at that," he said finally. "At what? At separating the things that look alike, but aren't." He held her gaze. "You've been doing it since the car. Marcus's belief from the truth, running from retreating, saving from being saved." He paused. "You have a very precise mind." She felt something warm move through her chest. Not romance, something more foundational than that. The feeling of being accurately seen, of having the person across from you look at you clearly and reflect back what's actually there, not what they expected or needed or wanted. 3 years of survival does that, she said. You learn to see the difference between things that look the same because your life depends on it. "I know," he said. And in 2 words, she heard the resonance of a man who had learned the same lesson in a different school. Bank. Elena was bruised along the left side and had a cut above her eye, and the particular furious expression of a woman who was injured and was not planning to behave as if being injured changed anything about her schedule. She looked at Victor when he arrived and said, "Before you say anything, I found the van, and I made a judgment call, and I stand by the judgment call." "You could have been killed," Victor said. His voice was the flattest she'd ever heard it. "I wasn't," Elena said. "Elena. Victor?" She looked at him with the steady, no-performance directness of 14 years of professional relationship. "I found actionable information. I transmitted it. The execution was imperfect. We move forward." She looked at Na. "You must be the reason for all of this." "I'm Na," she said. "Elena Marsh." She extended her hand despite the bandage on the other one. Her grip was firm. "He doesn't bring people in," she said with a directness that wasn't unkind. "In 14 years, I've never seen him bring someone in like this." "Elena," Victor said. "I'm noting a fact," Elena said. "Let me note facts. I'm an attorney. It's what I do." She looked at Na steadily. "You must be worth noting." Na held her gaze. "I'm working on it." Something moved in Elena's expression assessment, and then something that was unmistakably approval. The 72 hours passed, the way pressure passes not all at once, but in the accumulating release of a structure slowly losing its ability to hold. On the first morning, Devlin Cole Raymond Kirsch was seen leaving his new location on the west side with luggage. Victor's contact at the city confirmed the dispute timeline had formally accelerated. Marcus's attorneys filed a motion to delay, which was denied. On the second day, the 2 Aldridge informants faced with documentation that would reach their employers recanted their arrangements with Marcus. The catering firm fired the woman who had used Priya's identity. Priya, for her part, had provided 3 hours of detailed information in exchange for Victor making a phone call about her brother's situation. A phone call that by early afternoon had produced a result she'd apparently considered impossible. She'd cried when Dara told her. Not loudly, just sat in the plain room on the 11th floor with her hands over her mouth and her eyes closed. Na had been there for it, had sat across from her in the same chair and said nothing, and let the relief move through the room without filling the space with words it didn't need. On the third morning, Marcus called the prepaid phone. She was with Victor when it happened. They were in his office. She'd been there more and more, not because she needed supervision, but because she'd acknowledged to herself where she wanted to be. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. But she knew. She always knew. She looked at Victor. He looked at her. He said nothing, which was exactly the right response. She answered, "Nah." His voice was different. She heard it immediately, the thing that was missing. The patience. The absolute certainty quality that had always underlined every word like a current. It was still composed, still recognizably Marcus, but underneath the composition, something had shifted. Something was working harder to hold the shape. "Marcus," she said, "I think we've—" He stopped, started again. "I think things have gone further than they needed to. I think we both—" "Marcus," she said again, calm. "Stop." He stopped. "I'm not coming back," she said. "I want you to hear that clearly, not as something to negotiate or plan around or wait out. I'm not coming back. This is the last time I'll say it because after this I won't be saying anything to you at all." She paused. "The people you had watching me are gone. Kirsch is gone. The financial situation you're managing, I think you know where that's going." She kept her voice even. Not cruel, not triumphant, just clear. "I'm telling you this because I'd rather you hear it plainly from me than spend more time and money discovering it incrementally." She paused. "Goodbye, Marcus. I mean it this time." She ended the call. The room was very quiet. Victor looked at her. "How do you feel?" She thought about it honestly. Thought about 3 years of running and the car floor and the gala and Priya's folded hands and her mother's voice saying, "I've been waiting." Thought about Elena's firm handshake and Dana's packed bag and Victor's hand barely touching her elbow and meaning, "I'm here." Thought about standing when she didn't have to run. "I feel like myself," she said. "I can't remember the last time that was true." Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the desk between them. Small, dark. A ring simple signet style with a crest she didn't recognize. She looked at it, then at him. "It's not romantic," he said immediately. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not making that kind of statement." He held her gaze. "It belonged to my mother. She gave it to me when I was 23, and she said it was for the person I met who understood the difference between authority and ownership." He paused. "She said I'd know when I met them." Na looked at the ring, at Victor, at the ring again. "She was talking about a business partner," she said. "Probably," he said. She was practical. "But you're giving it to me." "I'm offering it to you," he said. "There's a difference. You can decline. You can take it. You can put it in a drawer and think about it for a year. I'm not—" He stopped. And for the first time, she saw Victor Renner genuinely unsure of the next word, which was perhaps the most intimate thing she'd witnessed in all of this. "I'm not putting conditions on it." She looked at him for a long time. Looked at a man who had opened a door he didn't have to open and left a lock unlocked. He could have secured and said, "I'll handle it without requiring anything in return," and made one phone call that changed the trajectory of everything and sat in a hallway at 1 a.m, because he'd known she'd need something when the call was done. She picked up the ring. It was heavier than it looked. "Authority, not ownership," she said. "Yes." She turned it in her hand. "Your mother sounds like she was very precise." "She was," he said. "You'd have liked her." She looked at him. Felt the small, stubborn, reclaimed thing in her chest, that piece of herself she'd been building back, choice by choice, door by door, settle into something that was not fragile, and not borrowed, and not contingent on what came next. She slid the ring onto her right hand. It fit. Of course it fit. "I'm not your possession," she said. "No," he said. "You're not. And I'm not under your protection." "You're not," he agreed. "You're under your own." She nodded. Then we understand each other. We do, he said. She looked at the ring on her hand, looked at the city through his window, Chicago gray and lit and permanent, still conducting its indifferent business, still moving in the way cities moved without pausing for the small seismic invisible things that happened inside buildings and cars and plane rooms on the 11th floor and dining rooms at noon and hallways at 1 in the morning. She had climbed into a stranger's car 4 nights ago with $340 and no plan and 3 years of running worn into her bones like old weather. She had stood when standing was the hardest thing. She had stayed when every trained instinct said to run. She had said goodbye to the thing that had followed her and faced the people who'd been watching her and called her mother and told Priya the truth and picked up the ring without flinching. She was not saved. She had never needed saving. She had needed ground to stand on long enough to save herself. And she had found it. Built it really choice by choice, word by word, one unlocked door at a time. Na looked at her own hand, at the ring, at the city. And for the first time in 3 years, she was not running, not hiding, not surviving. She was simply and completely, and on her own terms here. And here it turned out was exactly where she had always been going.